And I know we're going to go live in a second. I'll be right back. Hang on, folks. It's funny that just so you know, this is a live hangout. I apologize. I had to go grab my notes. I'm Bobby Halton, and welcome to Fire Engineering's Google Hangout. This is the first of 2015, and we're bringing you a brand new format for this year. Today is the first installment of the Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout. Wednesday, first Wednesday of every month is going to be focus on training. And in order to make sure that we were on track and on point, we enlisted the help of probably one of the foremost instructors in the country, two of the foremost instructors in the country, both gentlemen with impeccable credentials, incredible pedigrees, and dynamic and engaging personalities. None other than Steve Pegram and Aaron Heller. And every week they'll be bringing on every first Wednesday of the month, they'll be bringing in different guests. They'll be providing you with a training tip. They'll be talking about training. I'll occasionally be on with them, as well as Erich Roden when he's available. Erich, unfortunately, today is out at the PPV tests in Northbrook, Illinois with the UL folks. And I'll be engaging with those folks sometime in the next couple of weeks. I'll be out there as well. But Erich is there today, unfortunately. We'll be popping in from time to time. But the two hosts you're going to have every first Wednesday are going to be the Steve Pegram, who is the president of the Instructor Society, as well as Aaron Heller, who runs a training company down in Jersey and is also a full-time Jersey fire chief. And he'll be talking a little bit more about himself today as we introduce ourselves in this new Hump Day Hangout. First Wednesday, training. Focus on training. And I can't think of two better guys to anchor it. So, gentlemen, welcome to the first Hump Day Hangout on training. Steve, why don't you begin by giving folks a little bit about your bio and who you are and the Instructor Society and what you've got in store for the rest of 2015 every first Wednesday of the month.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Bobby, and thanks again for having me and inviting ISFSI to be part of this. I just real fast wanted to say that the Instructor Society is again excited to be involved with Penwell Fire Engineering at FDIC, which is coming up here very soon. I know we were talking offline that a lot of the classes are filling up fast. If you are an instructor and or instructor-driven person, the ISFSI again will have their instructor development clinic on Monday. It's one of the hot workshops on Monday. That class is filling up very fast. Will be taught by lead instructor Forrest Reeder, who's also a past Instructor of the Year award winner at FDIC. And so if you're interested in that, if instructing is your passion and what you're interested in, we encourage you to get involved in that as well. And of course, our general membership meeting will again be on Friday. And of course, I'll be on stage with you, Bobby, on Thursday, giving out the prestigious Instructor of the Year award.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Steve, a little bit about your background. Why don't you share with everybody out there a little bit about Steve Pegram?
Sure. I was actually born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. Started running around the house with a plastic fire helmet on my head as soon as I could. Always had this as my interest, my passion, my hobby. When I was a teenager, I told my parents I was going to move in with my grandmother because all of her next-door neighbors in a small town outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania were volunteer firefighters, and I found out through them that you could join the fire department at age 16. So I told my parents when I was about 12 that I was going to leave them at age 16 and move in with Grandma, and I think they thought I was kidding until I did it. And so starting at age 16, I was a volunteer firefighter in Pennsylvania, and then soon after that, I was a volunteer firefighter in New Jersey, in Mercer County. To Aaron Heller, we were classmates together in the fire science program at Mercer County Community College about 20-something years ago. That's all I'll say about that. But Aaron and I actually used to work in the same county at opposite ends of the county, so we didn't see each other a whole lot, but we heard each other on the radio a lot. And I rose through the ranks in the volunteer fire service all the way up to chief. and at the same time worked full-time in fire code, fire prevention, investigations, that sort of thing. Moved to Ohio 18 years ago to take a deputy fire chief's job, and I've been in Ohio ever since, working in combination and fully career departments. And I'm currently the fire chief in Goshen. I've been here going on a little over 5 years, and we're a combination career, part-time, and volunteer, paid-on-call department. And also, like you mentioned before, I'm in my second year, or starting my second year as president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. And I think it's a great organization, especially from the opportunity that you get from mentoring and the peers that you meet, and the opportunities you get through the society and the people you get to meet through the society. It definitely helped me out when I was lieutenant and a captain, assistant chief, and it's my honor to serve as their president.
Well, I had a little audio at the end there, but you reminded me of one thing, Steve, and great bio. We have an election coming up in the society shortly, don't we?
We do. The way the society works is everybody's on a 2-year term. So last year was the election for all the executive board, president, vice president, second vice president, etc. This year there is Eastern regional directors, Western regional directors, and director-at-large positions open. Those elections opened up yesterday. If you're a member of the society, you should have received an email yesterday with a link to vote online. If you are a member of the society and you did not get the link, you can contact our office through our website, isfsi.org, or also call the 1-800 number that's on the isfsi.org website, and we will make sure that we have a correct email address for you. That's the biggest problem we find is email issues.
Man, and I'll tell you, when I saw the names of the gentlemen who are running, I thought, how do you pick between these guys? I mean, it was just a who's who. Shane Cutler, Jimmy Silvernail, Larry Conley. I'm blanking on Doug's last name, Doug. But I mean, I'm like, holy cow! These aren't just. They're not just.
Yeah, we're very.
Am I losing your audio, Steve? We got an audio check on that, Brandon? Am I losing Steve's audio? Steve?
I'm having issues on my end, but I'm not sure if you're hearing me or not.
Hearing you real good now.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just a who's who of. If you're not a member of the Instructor Society, boy, you get a discount to FDIC. Also, right now with FDIC, tremendous discount opportunity. If you're not a subscriber to Fire Engineering right now and you subscribe, you can get $100 off your registration FDIC. The subscriber rate is amazing. So, if you're not a subscriber to Fire Engineering, for the $25 or whatever it is to subscribe for the year, you can get You can save yourself $75. So, just some real cool opportunities out there for FDIC, which, as Steve mentioned earlier, is filling up fast. The reason Steve mentioned the instructors class, which we'll talk a little bit about later, it's filling up. That workshop's probably going to sell out. It's about 3/4 full already, and we're still 3 months out, so it'll probably sell out. And the NIST UL class is about 65 to 70% sold out at this point. So if you want to get in on the NIST UL live burn, please register now and get yourself to FDIC. So, well, thank you, Steve. Aaron, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your pedigree and what you want to do with the show for the rest of the year.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I always consider it a thrill and an honor that I'm a part of fire engineering and that I've survived this many years still doing it, and it seems to keep moving up for me. So I really do consider it an honor to get to talk to this many people and be on that national stage and listen to what everybody else is doing. So I consider myself as much of a student as an instructor throughout my career. My career started very similar to Steve as a junior volunteer here in New Jersey. in many years ago, so I now have 30 years in the fire service, going into my 31st, finishing up my 25th career year. I started in a little town called Juliustown in Burlington County as a junior there because I had some family in it and just thought it would be really cool. And as I got older, when I realized I couldn't be a pro baseball player and I blew out both knees and had them operated on before I was 20 years old, I knew that I still could physically be a firefighter, and that's the path I chose. I was fortunate enough. I joined a volunteer company in the town I live here in New Egypt, New Jersey. And again, kind of like Steve, very young, inexperienced, but rose through the ranks probably way too quickly, and ended up being the chief of department. And from that, I gained a ton. And in the process, I also got hired in Hamilton, New Jersey, where I'm still at. I work in District 9. We have 9 districts. We cover 40 square miles between us all. I think we're up to about 110 career staff, and I'm a captain of an engine company there. We basically operate all facets of the job and do a whole lot of rescue and SOC training and work. But we're mainly an engine company, and we stay fairly busy. So that's where I've been on that side of it. As far as training goes, I was fortunate to get a chance to teach at the Ocean County Fire Training Academy, and then I moved on to Mercer County. And as Steve said, we met in college in the early 90s, taking Mercer County College Associate's degree classes. And over the years, I started doing drills for companies in the area simply because guys needed help. And I was fortunate enough to travel around and get a lot of training, and I felt that the best way to use that training was to share it. And being married to an accountant who's always afraid of legal issues and everything else, she said, we better make it legal, and you need to start a little company to protect it. And that's what we did. And our little company's 10 years old now, and On Scene Training Associates has been all over the country. And in fact, we've worked in the South Pacific, and we're headed back there in about 3 weeks. Carl Haddon and myself and Anthony Correa will be going back over to Saipan to do some more training. So it goes full circle, and it's truly an honor to be a part of this. As far as the future of this program goes, I think it'll be great getting the information from so many other people and the input that this offers, because right now I think that training is really at a crossroads. I see a lot of topics that we can discuss, and I really feel that we're at a crossroads, and a lot of people are going to choose a certain fork, and others will choose another, and hopefully we'll make it work for the best. But again, I appreciate being here, Bob.
Well, that'd be a great way to Steve, if you're ready, I guess we could start the hangout and let people know if you want to send us questions. We actually got a few questions in it already from some of the regular listeners. It's hashtag FETalk. That's hashtag FETalk. Hashtag FETALK. That'll get your questions directly to our producer, who'll send them on to me, and we'll get your questions on the air. But that was a great point. I'd kind of like it to elaborate a little bit, Aaron, about the crossroads. You know, the great philosopher Yogi Berra said, "If you come to a fork in the road, pick it up." But
Yeah.
what do you mean by a crossroads, and where do you think the two paths lead?
Well, I hope they lead to a better, safer, more efficient, and more effective fire ground. It's where I hope they lead. But what I see is I see a new generation. I see folks who have a tremendous grasp of social media and the ability to truly promote themselves and training on social media versus others who are actually out there getting dirty and training. And I think we need to merge the two. We talked a little bit before we were on the air about credibility, and I'm not so sure that all the guys out there instructing have true credibility so much as they've been able to design credibility via social media. But anybody can say they're an instructor. Anybody can go to some classes, get a certification that says you can do it. But until you get the acceptance of firefighters on the drill ground, you probably are fooling yourselves and anybody else. So I kind of think that's a part of where we're hanging here. Well, like I said, the credibility issue is a big part of which fork we're going to choose.
Any thoughts, Steve? Or
I know we were having some audio issues, so I switched connections real quick. Do you hear me a little bit better now?
you sound much better, my friend.
All right, good. Absolutely, I think we see it, and Aaron and I came up in the fire service about the same time, same part of the country, and I think we're both seeing the same thing. Is, you know, we were the snot-nosed kids that the guys that were on the job in the 70s and 80s couldn't stand in the early 90s, and now we're starting to see, you know, the next generation of that. But so much has changed in that period of time, especially with technology, and we're so connected. And Aaron and I were talking before that we spend so much time attached to a computer and so much time attached to our phones that we have a tendency to default to that, I think, with our training as well. And I saw a real big push in the last 5 years or so where we moved a lot of training to the internet and watching videos and doing online classes and online training. And I think there's a place for that. Definitely fills in the gap in continuing education. But I know here locally a lot of us got away from hands-on training, and we need to get back to, you know, getting the hands-on training and dropping hose and throwing ladders, because I did see a downturn in proficiency of things like throwing ladders and stretching hose that was instilled in me in the mid to late 80s, where we went out on drill night and threw ladders, and we would hit a hydrant 30 times a night. We would just drive around, and the officer would just keep stopping at hydrants and stopping at hydrants. And every hydrant we hit, we had to drop. We used a HUMAT valve. We wrapped the hydrant, laid it, hooked up the valve. We broke it down, loaded it on the truck, and did it again. And I see, and we're all guilty of it. We got, especially in the chief's job like I have, we spend so much time and get tied to the computer and the phone, and we forget to get outside because, you know, we don't have computer and phone fires. We have structure fires. We have car fires. We have auto extrication, hazmat, all that sort of stuff. And so we need to get outside of the firehouse when we do training and stop spending so much time inside.
Yeah, and you know, at FDIC, that's one of the things that, you know, we were talking about. I've got the numbers for FDIC in front of me. I was looking at them today. You know, and in particular the hands-on training, where we bring in about several hundred instructors, 198 plus, maybe 230 plus, depending on the year, instructors. And when we do that, we're very careful about their pedigree. And when I use the word pedigree, that's a term that I got from my good friend Tom Brennan, and it basically means, you know, as I asked Steve and Aaron to do at the beginning of the show, tell us where you came from and how you came up through the system. And I think what Aaron was alluding to today, and I'll just be honest with you, one of the reasons why I'm not going to host anymore is I've got 2 pensions and a bad attitude. And most of the folks that know me know I'm living on borrowed time. So I've got a very thin filter. I'll just tell you the truth as I see it and let the chips fall where they may, apologize when I'm wrong, and gloat relentlessly when I'm right. But I'm just kidding. But I think pedigrees matter. And I think that, you know, knowing if someone actually has the street cred to train on it. The old example is the instructor who shows up to do a high-rise class, and then you find out there's no high-rises in their town or their city. You know, that they've never been to a high-rise fire. They've just read about them. Well, that doesn't make you it makes you a student of high-rise fires, but it doesn't make you an authority on high-rise fires. You need to blend experience with training, with education, so that you're the complete package, with a philosophy of life. So you need the 3 legs of that stool in order to be credible. And I also think, and this is my opinion, and we look at it at FDIC, that it's important, and we have many instructors instructing who are firefighters. It doesn't mean that you have to have gone through the ranks, but if you're giving a class on leading the fire department, you probably should be a chief officer, at least a ranking chief officer, whether it's battalion, district, or assistant. You know, it doesn't have to be chief of department, but you should have gone through that system. And likewise, if you're going to be doing an extrication class, you probably should have been on a truck company or a rescue company or a company that did extrication, and you ought to have some street cred. And one of the things we do at FDIC is that we have a program where every lead instructor has his cadre of folks that instruct for them. Well, that gentleman or lady can bring in what we call apprentices who then are non-paid, but they're folks that have cred or believe they have cred that can work with that team that year and try to earn their way onto the team. And so it gives them a chance to show what they've got and get in front of the group. So it's kind of neat. And we really don't see that, Aaron, I guess, on the classroom side as much. But one of the things we do at FDIC is we do ask people for their bios. And I always get very concerned when the gentleman or lady's bio says worked for 2 years here or worked for 2 years there, and now at 2 years or 4 years on the job, they're the assistant chief of something. You know what I mean? So it doesn't show any connection with real-world experience. And without real-world experience, it's very difficult for them to make that moral and emotional leap to what really makes a firefighter a firefighter. Am I saying that the right way? There's probably a better way to say that, but I think that's a big issue, and I credit you. I think, Aaron, I think you're very courageous to bring it up because I think it's an important issue.
It's not a popular topic, and you know, the one thing you said is you don't have much of a filter, so maybe I'm going to be in trouble over this because I'm not quite as old, but I lost my filter a long time ago. But that must be a Jersey thing. I don't know. Steve probably is gaining it back by being in the Midwest there, you know.
I am.
And being a chief, he has to be more cautious. So I'm only a captain, so I don't have to be quite as cautious. But you know, that is part of it. And I've been to too many classes, and even here in Jersey, when I take a research class, I look at it really closely now. And these are forced classes that we need to take to maintain our licenses. And some of the people that I've seen instructing, I know where they came from. And I look and I think, my God, they wrote up a really good description. They fluffed up a really nice bio. But in reality, they've never had their tail feathers scorched in a fire. So how are you going to teach me about true firefighting? Now, if they're talking to me about something leadership-wise or they're talking to me about code of compliance, that's a different story. But I think we all have to put it into perspective. And again, like I said, the Facebook firefighters, the social media, and the bloggers out there, some are fantastic. Others are just fabricated. And we see it. We see it all over. And it's really frightening to me because there's a lot of students out there who don't know the difference between really good training and mediocre training with some flash and dash. And the difference between substance and flash. And I've taught in places where they told me this guy was so good, and then when they got done the class, they said to us, "Wow, he didn't do it that way." And my point was they learned the difference over time between substance and just flash and dash.
Have I told you about my new class, Leadership Through Code Competence?
Nice.
Yeah, I think it's. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just gonna say, sign me up.
I think it's a big issue. I think one of the things that we need to be doing when we're bringing folks in to teach for us or speak for us is ask for their pedigree and then question them about it if it's vague. You know, 2 years here or 2 years there. 2 years here or there doing what? You know what I mean? Or you know, you know, what were you doing? Were you a firefighter? Were you an engineer? Were you a company officer? Were you a battalion chief? Were you an assistant chief? Were you a, you know, did you do the dance? You know what I mean? And that should be documented in some way. You know, and if they haven't, then in my opinion, I'm not really interested in what they have to say. Old Teddy Roosevelt quote about the critic. You know, if they're just a critic of our industry, God bless them. But I can tell you what you can do with your critics. You know, I'd much prefer to be in the cheerleading section than the critics section. So, which is where I routinely find myself. So let's get into some training issues that we'd put down. And I got a great question came in from an unknown gentleman who you guys might have heard of. I'm just kidding. Came in from one of the most I think prolific and up and coming and really one of the coolest guys I've gotten to know over the years. Really neat guy, Jason Hubelman. So Jason, who will be teaching a bailout class at FDIC, which is a really great bailout class, a hands-on class on bailouts. So if you want to take a class, a really good class on bailouts that covers the entire perspective of it, Jason and his team are doing a great hands-on training class for us. But Jason says he wants to ask both of you guys, and this is have to go to you guys because I've been out of it for a long time. What are your thoughts and experience with battery-powered tools, reliability, limitations, etc.? Really weren't that popular when I left the hands-on training arena and field about 10 years ago. So I'd really have to defer to you two guys to talk about what's going on with battery-powered tools. What are you seeing in terms of reliability and dependability?
Well, from everything I'm seeing, especially from the extrication standpoint, it does fall into training. The battery-powered tools certainly have a place. I think that the battery technology is far better than what it was 5 and 10 years ago. Not that I'm an expert on it or an electrical engineer, but just through the testing that we've done with extrication tools, I see a definite improvement. My opinion is, though, that I would still not truly rely on it all the time because, as we know, when you get into calls, somebody forgot to check a battery at some time on a truck check, or something can go wrong with anything. So I wouldn't rely 100% on it. I still like either electric or electric as in hardwired for zip saws and things like that if need be. But the new Hamacho and the new Hurst, and I hear that T&T is coming out with a serious line of electrical rescue tools. I think that they all do have a place in the fire service. When you get into tighter spaces, confined spaces, you get into working inside of buildings. Mark Gregory and the guys talk about man the machine stuff all the time. Places where we can't operate with fumes. They definitely have their place. And training wise, since we're talking about that, test these things out in training and find out what's really going to work for you. Don't believe the salesman. We talk about it all the time. Salesmen are there to sell us. They're not always there to be our friends. So that's my little shtick on that. But it's a really good question by Jay. And for RIT work, I know that Jay's involved in RIT work. I've been involved in it for years. That is another key thing where hand pump things and electric are not a bad option at all for that.
Steve, any thoughts on battery-powered tools?
Well, when you get into this business, you start to develop relationships with people, and you get that guy or a couple people that are your experts for whatever the topic is. And it's funny that Jason asked the topic when he did, because usually when I have an auto extrication or a tool question, I call Aaron. And because that exactly what we were just talking about a minute ago, that's Aaron's area of expertise. And so if you want extrication information, you ask Aaron, you ask a guy who does that. So I thought it was interesting that Jason asked that. My department for our area does a fair share of auto extrications. We're not a big tech rescue company. If it's trench, confined space, things like that, we don't get into it, but we do auto extrication. We are just looking at switching to some battery-powered tools, and I agree with Aaron that we've seen a huge improvement in battery technology. The stuff that I was experienced 10, 15 years ago was terrible. Every time we went to use it, the batteries were dead. We were constantly burning up chargers, constantly having to send batteries out to be rebuilt. But I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of people, the manufacturers, but also departments that have already made the switch, that the technology has improved. And definitely it's nice to work with a tool that doesn't have a tether attached to it. You can go further from the truck or further from the pump. As Aaron mentioned, in a RIT situation or a tech rescue situation, it makes things much better. But I think all of us are waiting to see how well they hold up, how well the batteries hold up and stuff like that. But I'm assuming, based upon the technology and everything we've seen with electronics, that there's going to be a big wave of battery-powered tools, not just extrication tools, but battery-powered tools in general. The only other concern that I have is departments that are making the decision to switch completely. So they're putting all their eggs into battery-powered tools, getting rid of their hydraulic, gas, or electric-powered tools, and I would be leery of making that complete switch. And that's why we're going here in Goshen at our department. We just purchased new tools, and we went with spreaders and cutters that are hydraulic, run off the traditional high-pressure hose to a gas pump, and we bought a electric combination tool. So we can start working with the electric tool. It comes off the truck quickly. You don't have a hose. One person can operate it. They can get started making some cuts or purchase points on the door, and then you come in with the big hydraulic tools to finish the job.
Kind of like almost like a hybrid vehicle. It's got gas, but it's also got battery. Is almost the preferred option there. And I agree with you, Steve. One of the things I always lament is the mentality of the one size fits all, or this is the silver bullet. You know, you go to some organizations, all they have is, you know, and I'm not saying I don't want to get the whole smooth fog, you know, straight tip debate, but we just use fog nozzles. Well, really? I mean, you know, or we just use smooth bores, or we just use, you know, or we just use this, or we just use that. Then you're missing the point. Every tool has its, and Aaron said it. You know, if you're in a confined space, you don't want to be taking a gas-powered tool down there. You know, you want to take something that's not going to create a more dangerous environment. So, you know, important stuff. And what was made a neat segue from that question, and kind of throw this at both of you also, is I'm sitting here in Tulsa, Oklahoma today, and it is 18 degrees. Now, I don't know what it is in Ohio, but I know that we have a tremendous cold front that's tearing through the country right now. I know you're getting hit with it too, Aaron.
Yeah.
Think about, let's visit for a couple minutes about cold weather training, cold weather's effects on the bodies, cold weather's effects on, you know, fireground issues, slips and falls and such. But also, you know, it's interesting as we're just talking about batteries. One of the biggest enemies of a battery is cold weather, and it's still pretty much the case, right?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. Again, I said I'm no expert on it. I'm no engineer on it. There's guys who write solely on that. But everything I've found was that they just didn't last the same when they did get in those kind of conditions. And you're right. Right now, you look out my window and it's snow on the ground, and it's probably about 10 degrees with the wind chill. It's gonna take its toll not only on your equipment but certainly on your personnel. And I go back on shift tonight, and I'm working a 34-hour tour, and the drill that I'm supposed to be doing with the guys is it's an SCBA research drill, but it's going to put them through their paces, not just this is what a bypass valve is. You know, they have to work in it, and they have a lot of things to do. One of the things is to throw the portable ladders. Now, my engine room's big enough I can do it on the inside, but if it wasn't, I wouldn't be able to take them out tomorrow in the ground covered with ice safely and do it. Not that it's not going to happen on a fire scene, and the argument would be practice as you play. So, you know, where are the risk management guys going to do with me if I take them out and I'm throwing ladders tomorrow when it's 12 degrees is what they're saying, and high winds, and you know, but where do they get that experience otherwise? Because it doesn't say we're not going to catch a job tomorrow. It's a really good point training wise.
I think that's a great point that Aaron just brought up, and it's -6 with the wind chill in Ohio right now, and that's not normal for us. But Aaron brings out a point that I've used the term all the time. You know, we have to train like we play and play like we train, but at the same time you have to assess the risk side of it and the safety issue for your personnel. You don't want to go out and throw ladders, like he said, in the ice. But we do have fires in the winter. We do have fires in the summer. And before we were doing Humpday Hangouts, we were doing a podcast. And one of the podcasts a couple years ago, we had a guest on from Alaska, and I asked them the question, you know, at what point do you cancel training outdoors? And their answer was negative. When the wind chill hits -20, they stop operating outside. And around here, if it gets to be about 45, I start getting the whining that, you know, they don't want to go out and train outside. And so it's definitely, you know, our environment and what we're used to, but we might have a fire a few minutes from now and it's -6, but that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and train the guys in -6 weather. I'm going to change the training and what we're doing today so we can still do the skills, but maybe we're doing the skills inside or in a different environment than going outside and throwing ladders or spraying water when we know everything's going to freeze up and potentially damage our equipment.
Well, and I think the other issue when we talk about doing training in those kinds of conditions is we have to remember too that our readiness to respond will be impacted as well. So if we get our firefighters encrusted in ice and such because we were flowing water at -6, you know, should a real emergency hit where we may need to do that, it's going to impede our abilities to respond. So I think there's always that fine line between how extreme can we take our training and as long as it doesn't impact our ability to respond. Now, if you've got a big enough operation where you can take crews out of service and still have coverage, as I was able to do when I was running training in Albuquerque, we could pull 8 or 10, 12 units out of service for the day and have them and not impact service delivery in the community. That's a tremendous cushion, if you will. And I know most organizations don't have that cushion. So, to those organizations that don't, you need to be more, I think, intelligent, as Steve and Aaron just laid out, in how you do your training. And I also think we need to think about how cold weather, it can sap your energy just like hot weather. I'm old, and cold weather really kicks my butt worse than hot weather, and it really fatigues me more rapidly than the hot weather does, which is just a normal part of aging. I hate to break the news to people, but so when we talk about the cold weather training, and I'd like to kind of stick with this, and cold weather preparations that you make, what other things do you work on? Pump operations. I remember one of the things we used to do with our pump operators at this time of the year was we used to remind them to keep a line open, a drain line open, to keep the water moving in the pump, so we didn't freeze pumps on -6. You could freeze a pump. So we used to do stuff like that. Is there any special stuff that this time of year, or things you could share with the folks who might be listening today who are dealing with 10 below and 12 below out in the audience?
Well, if they're dealing with it already, they probably have their own techniques that they're using. I would hope. Stuff passed down to me. One of the things is our chauffeur on every run, even if it's a medical run or whatever, we get out and he circulates. Has to keep the thing flowing so we don't freeze it up. The other thing is, do you dry your pump or don't you dry your pump? That was always a big question. We don't dry our pumps, which I know a lot of people do. We don't dry them simply because we felt that we weren't going to get them all the way dried out. And when we left a little bit of moisture in there, it froze quicker than if we had a full pump of water free. It wouldn't freeze as quick. So that was one of the thoughts that we ran with. But even on medical runs, when we pull up on a day like this, our chauffeur should be out and he should be circulating the water. And if you're on a job, obviously keeping a line flowing even after things start getting shut down, or you're going to have a pipe instead of a hose.
Well, I hate to break this to all my global warming friends, but which is funny, because it's actually been getting warmer since about the 12th century, so shocking. But I wrote a great editorial about it, giving those poor people a hard time. I'm agnostic on the issue of how much people are contributing to it, just so you know, for full disclosure. But the interesting thing about this particular cold front that we're dealing with the last several years, this extreme cold front, which is actually what people were predicting back in the 70s, another mini ice age like we had in the 12th century. But the temperatures we have here in Tulsa today, Aaron, interesting enough, are 35 degrees below normal. And I know in Dallas it was down to like 10 or 12. Parts of the South, when I was in Birmingham last year, I was in a snowstorm. They hadn't had a snowstorm there in 30 years.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks that are dealing with this stuff, it kind of is the first time. And we're like, wow. I remember the guys in Alabama telling me, well, I think there's a snow plow somewhere in Alabama.
Yeah.
It wasn't in our town where I was that day, but they thought they had one. Well, let's.
I don't know, Steve. Do you
unless
guys
you have something else for cold weather? I've got a couple other things I want to hit you guys with before we ran out the clock. So, anything else on cold weather?
Real fast, Bobby. We just had this topic come up yesterday in our staff meeting, and there's the one other thing we didn't talk about is personal responsibility, and that is reminding the guys and gals 2 pairs of socks, a hat, a warm pair of gloves, not fire gloves, but a warm pair of gloves and things like that. Have those, on the truck with you, at the firehouse with you, and layer. It's okay to wear long johns when you know it's going to be -6. Around the firehouse, wear the T-shirt, and then when you go on the run, put on the layers before you put on your turnout gear. But we have a captain here who's been on the job about 15 years longer than me, and they make fun of him all the time because he's wearing 3 layers, 4 layers in the wintertime. But you know what? You never see him out on a cold run, and we've been out for 3-4 hours doing the dance because he's freezing to death, because he's got the layers on underneath. And when he's in the firehouse, he walks around with his T-shirt on. But when he goes out on a run, he's got layered up and he's protecting himself. And like you said, cold will do just as much damage on you as the heat will. We're just, I don't think, as used to it as much because we go outside a lot in the summertime when it's nice, and in the wintertime we stay indoors.
Yeah. Well, you know, and it's funny, you know, Steve brings it up about the older guy with a little bit of experience. There's so much wisdom in some of our senior members or our older members, and it gets ingrained, and you almost forget sometimes to pass stuff on. But while Steve was talking, I'm wearing thermals today. I mean, it just like I woke up and it's just like an old habit that I got from being on the line for all those years during the cold months, and I work inside an office all day long, but I've got my thermals on. You know, it's just what you do. You become a creature of habit. You still wear your darn thermals. So we got a great question here that came in from one of the viewers, and so I'll throw it out to these guys. Now, a lot of this stuff is unscripted, which is kind of cool. So if you're a listener to the Humpday Hangouts, as Steve and Aaron take us forward into the new year with first Wednesday of every month is going to be training, you know, send them your questions and get honest, unscripted responses, which is I love that. You know, when you just ask somebody a question and you get the real gouge. You know what I mean? In the military, they use the word gouge for the straight talk, the real facts, not the PC filtered, you know, company line stuff. So here's a good one for you guys, because I know you're dealing with it. What editing tips would the panel suggest for those posting fireground videos for training purposes? That's a really cool question. What editing tips would you two guys recommend for those posting fireground videos for training purposes?
Steve, you can take the lead on that one.
My initial reaction was don't post them. But I know that's not reality, and I know, Bobby, that you shared on Fire Engineering yesterday, I think, or the day before, a blog post I wrote, and part of that blog post was reaction to the internet quarterbacks that we have. And I think the biggest thing I see is people post stuff, they don't really give much information, they just say, here's a video that was captured of a first-in-engine company, and then immediately 37 people post all the things that they did wrong. And what we're missing from the conversation when we're talking about tactics, when we're talking about training, when we're talking about all the videos that we see on the internet, and I enjoy looking at them just as much as everybody else does, is we're not factoring in what that community's response matrix is, what their staffing levels are, career, volunteer, part-time paid. Maybe they have a firehouse every 3 minutes. Maybe they have a firehouse every 23 minutes. And so to take a snapshot of a video and assume you know everything about that department, how they operate, what their resources are, how the call was dispatched, the time of day, et cetera, is kind of doing it's not very brotherly. You know, we talk about the brotherhood of the fire service, and I don't see a lot of brotherhood on the internet. I see a lot of brotherhood at training. I see a lot of brotherhood around the firehouse. I experienced a tremendous amount of brotherhood recently with my wife and her health problems and things like that. But I don't see it on the internet. And I think everybody on the internet needs to pause. And I write a lot of emails and a lot of memos that I delete because I write them and then I read them and say, nope, you shouldn't say that, Chief. And I delete it, or I save it for a few days and then rework it. And I think that's probably the biggest, not necessarily for the poster, and I know the question was more about the person posting the videos, but if you're going to comment on the videos, I think you need to use caution.
You know, Steve brings up two great points, and we're talking about training and instructors, and two great lessons that were passed on to me by two of my heroes. The first one was Chief Brunacini, who told me, never say or do anything that feels good when you're mad. That was the first one. The second one I learned from Abraham Lincoln, who is a great hero of mine, and what Lincoln used to do is exactly what Steve would do. He would write a letter to someone reacting to either an incident or a letter that he got from them, and then he would take that letter and he'd put it in a drawer, pull it out the next day, and then either would send it or he would rework it into a more appropriate letter. Unfortunately for Lincoln, he never destroyed the original letters, which you might want to do that. But yeah, you're right. And our initial reaction when we're posting videos on the from the fire ground is really to be a critic, which is, we started off this conversation talking about critics. I really don't give a darn about critics in the general sense. I think they're generally vapid losers who have nothing else to do but talk about people who are really trying to accomplish stuff who may have come up short. But if you're trying to do something, as Roosevelt said, you're going to come up short from time to time. And you get these beanbag wizards sitting in the basement of their mom's house who've actually seen a fire on TV who are suddenly posting as if they were Vinnie Dunn, for goodness sakes. And I think that's a problem. But I also think, and Bill's question is more nuanced than that. Should we identify organizations, or would it be more appropriate when you're posting a fireground video to try to in some way obscure the organization? I think that's a disservice. One of the best videographers, and I wish he was on with us live, and I think I'd love to have him teach. Steve Erich. Steve Erich is a beautiful photographer. He's a tremendous gentleman. He's a student of the game. He's a historian. He's a Renaissance man. He really is, and he's a multi-generation firefighter. Well, he posts videos all the time on FireEngineering.com, and if you look at the professional job that he does of posting them, giving the background information, showing what they're doing, letting you know what the crews are up against, the way that Steve does it, if I could to hold Steve Reddick's videos up on Fire Engineering's community site, if you go to Fire Engineering Community and check out how Steve Reddick does it, he'd be the best example I could give of someone who knows how to edit and post fireground videos in a professional, dignified, and respectful way. And he is the gold standard for fireground video, in my opinion. Him and Alan Simmons.
Well, and I think something to add to that. I don't know if one of the parts of his question was simply, if you're going to put up a training video, are you putting up your own videos of how to stretch a line or how to deploy a set of rescue tools or whatever the case may be. I've seen guys do that as well, and you have to be cautious when you do that for several reasons. First, make sure that you have permission from your department, because we all know guys who've gotten jammed up because they represented their department even though they didn't mean to. So if you're going to be stretching off an engine that says ABC Fire Department, and the chief of ABC Fire Department doesn't know you're going to be posting this stuff on social media, you could end up with a little problem there. So that would be one issue. The other issue that I find often too is guys are finding information from others, posting it as their own. You can't do it. Listen, if you learn this drill at FDIC and it came from Mike Dugan or Mike Champo or Ray McCormick or any of these instructors out there, you should give credit where credit's due. Photos, the videos, any of that, and that's part of your editing process. I make sure that when I'm teaching something, I'm teaching drags and carries, and we're talking about single-man ladder carries and drags. Well, I learned a lot of that from Dave Gallagher and Champo and a fellow named Bobby Swick from Fairborn, Ohio. Every time I bring it up, those names come out of my mouth. And if I were to cut a video and start doing it, training minutes or anything of that nature, you have to do that. I think credit where credit's due is important. One of the other things is, if you're going to post a training video of your department, this is how we do it, throw that disclaimer up. This is how we do it. It's worked well for us. These are the problems we've encountered. It may not work for everybody, because unfortunately, guys with a little bit of credential and who are on the web, again, who have a big blog or whatever the case may be, they may throw it up on their YouTube channel, and all of a sudden these young guys, or these, even not young guys, but inexperienced firefighters who just are trying to soak it all up, take it as gospel. And they have to understand this may not work for you. You may staff with 2, as we talked about earlier, and you're just really the moving truck and not the fire truck. But you staff with 2, you can't do the same operation that my video shows with 4 or 5 of us. So those kind of disclaimers in your editing process might not be a bad thing. And like you said, I've looked at tons of videos online and said, oh man, they should not have done that, or oh wow, that was really not the brightest move, but I don't comment it. because I just don't feel that's fair to those that are doing it. And I wasn't there. I don't know the circumstances or the emotions. So I may think it to myself, but I'm not going to publicly go out there with that kind of comment.
But Aaron, you raised a great point, Steve, and I'd love to hear your opinion on it. How important is attribution when we're doing a class or we're speaking or we're doing training? Uh, I recently had the experience of hearing somebody speak who basically I don't know how much of it was original. Probably the only original parts are probably the parts I didn't like, but it, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of the main parts of this person's talk were direct ripoffs of either Andy Fredericks or Brian Crawford, or myself was one of them, which I thought was interesting because I've never had an original thought, so I don't know who I stole it from originally. But how important is attribution? Because I thought it was very offensive, this gentleman's talk, and very offensive that he offered no attribution for the comments he made.
I think it's huge. I think the credibility of an instructor, the credibility of a speaker is almost more important than whatever they're speaking or discussing. I think we've all seen it, and not to throw anybody under the bus, but we've all walked into the classroom and sat there, and if you closed your eyes, you're listening to John Smith, but you're actually listening to Aaron Heller or Bobby Halton or Alan Bruno Sr., whoever it is. And there's a lot of people that use other people's information, other people's quotes, things like that, but they give credit. And it's just like if you go back to high school, I wasn't big on having to write research papers and stuff like that, but if you put a quote in a research paper, you got to cite where you got the quote from. And the same thing. Feel free to use my information, Aaron's information, Fire Engineering's information, whoever's information, but give the guy credit for where you heard it, where you learned it, where you saw it, and then relate it to your program and stuff like that. It's the people that don't do that and are out there, especially for a financial gain, is the biggest thing I see. They're out there teaching on their days off, or they're between jobs and they're teaching, and you go and see the program, and half of it, if not more, is stolen, for lack of a better term. And the only reason why it's stolen is because they don't give credit. If they just gave the credit, the author would be, cool, my information is out there, it's being shared, the more people that hear it, the better. But when you don't give credit, you really are stealing.
Great points. It was interesting. John Kennedy once said, if you want to be quotable, quote.
Good point.
And I don't think you can say it any more succinctly than that. I wanted to get to one other important training point. And I don't know. I think I'll be able to join you guys next February, but it's up in the air right now. So I've got to be honest with you. I'm not sure that I can be with you on the next hangout. So I wanted to get in all the questions I could on this one. But civil disobedience, riots. Today, tragically, the news broke this morning that 12 people were murdered in Paris by Islamic extremists who, were armed to the teeth and murdered 12 people. We have rioters in New York City and Ferguson and Berkeley, California, in the streets screaming, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now." Those are anarchists. Those are bad people. There's just I'm not gonna be politically correct here with anybody. If you're calling for dead cops, you're an anarchist. You're a bad person. That talk about a hate crime. So the problem with it is, and I think for the fire service, in my opinion, is that when we put on our uniforms, especially our chief officers and our duty jackets, man, we look an awful lot like law enforcement. And if you're going to wear a badge, to those people, to the anarchists and the people in the street who are wearing the Guy Fawkes masks and those characters, they don't know the difference between a cop and a firefighter's uniform. So we become just as big a target, just as big a symbol of authority as the police officers. As a matter of fact, the Ferguson riots started off as a dumpster fire that the department responded to, and then that was kind of a flashpoint for some of the activity that happened there. So what are some of your training suggestions to folks? One of the ones I would throw out is understand how the cops are going to deploy. Cops use a different system than we do, and they'll create a kill zone, an inner perimeter, an outer perimeter, and start shutting down roads, which could affect your response. So I would behoove any training officer who's out there today, call your PD counterparts and have them come over and sit down with your folks and say, hey, look, if we get active shooters or terrorists or riots or whatever going on, here's what we're going to do. So we're talking before we need to. But what are some of your suggestions in terms of civil disobedience or riots, or bad people like these anarchists who are out there calling for dead cops? What should we be planning for? What should we be doing? And what are some of your training suggestions?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I'm fortunate. I work in a fairly suburban neighborhood, although we have our bad areas. But
hey, Ferguson's pretty suburban too, bro.
Oh yeah, no, we're right on the border of Trenton, and Steve, like he said, he grew up there. We've got our element. There's no question it could happen here tomorrow. I think you've got to be in lockstep with your police department, and it starts at the top. A guy like Steve, the chief of department, and the chief of the police department, or their ops guys, they've got to develop a plan, and it's got to be filtered down to the guys on the street, and we've got to follow it very closely, because if we deviate from it, chances are bad things are going to happen to our personnel too. So as a company officer, I've told my guys I want them a little more heads up, just because of the fear of what's going on. We're seeing guys in my firehouse told me that they pulled their union stickers off their cars because they were concerned that was a target, basically, especially if their wife was driving it or something like that. And here in Jersey, concealed carry is really not the big thing, so we don't have the same opportunity to defend ourselves from this. So that would be my approach, would be to really follow what law enforcement's doing.
Great point. I hadn't even thought about the off-duty stuff. That's a great point. Steve, what are your thoughts as a chief of department, and how do you what do you suggest to folks to do, and what are you doing?
Well, I think the key, like Aaron said, is to make sure you're on page with your law enforcement agency and having those discussions and knowing, just like we talk about, knowing the deployment and the staffing of your mutual aid departments if you're running AMARs and things like that. But also you need to know the expectation, the capability of your police department. And I'm blessed to work in a fire department that has pretty decent staffing on our first out engine. Generally have 7-8 people on station with me here, and plus mutual aid and off-duty personnel. But there's one police officer on duty in our town. Sometimes two, and two is a luxury for them. And so while we're used to going in everywhere with 4 or 5 person engines and lots of backup, our chief of police, Ray Snyder, who just retired after 35 years, the very first trustees meeting I attended, there was some very upset residents who showed up at the meeting, started yelling and screaming, and it almost got physical. And I leaned over to him after the meeting and I asked him, if that gets out of control again, what do you want me to do, or who do you want me to call? And he leaned over and he said, Steve, 1 riot, 1 ranger. And the point being is they had, in their department and their staffing, they had come to realize that you're on your own and you had to know how to diffuse that situation and keep yourself safe. And that's how the Goshen Police Department operates, 1 riot, 1 ranger. Now, we're very blessed in the fire department that we don't have to operate that way. But as we talk about training, as we've talked about videos, everything else we've talked about, it's an understanding of knowing what your capabilities are, but also what the capabilities of those that are going to help you or you're going to be helping. And, we hear officer-involved shooting or an office. We had an officer-involved auto accident yesterday. And talking to some people, when they got on the scene with the engine company, there was already like 20 police officers on the scene. And we would do the same thing. If a fire truck got involved in an accident, we would rush to the scene. But having to know the capabilities, we've done a lot of active shooting scenarios with our schools because of the school shootings. And one of the biggest things that comes up is we're going to get there and stage with a couple fire trucks and a couple ambulances while the PD is still waiting for the second officer to get there. And, they've changed their operations to the first officer that gets there goes in with an assault rifle and tries to take out the threat, whereas they used to wait for 3 officers and go in as a team. And so they're adjusting their tactics, but I think, like Aaron said, the most important thing is making sure we're on the same sheet of music with our law enforcement agencies, but also as chiefs, in my role, making sure that after I have that meeting with the chief of police, that trickle that information down to the captains and lieutenants and firefighters, so that when I'm home asleep at 2 a.m. and they go on a shooting call or a murder-suicide or something like that, that they're in the loop with what the law enforcement's expecting from us and what we're expecting from them.
Great stuff. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap it up, and this will be my last kind of hosting job here for the Humpday Hangout First Wednesday training. I'll be turning over the reins to Steve and Aaron, who I trust implicitly. I will be sitting in from time to time just to lend, I guess, comic relief when they need me. You know, ask the old guy kind of seat, I guess, at the table. But Aaron and Steve will be taking over. They'll be bringing you exciting guests. They'll be talking to you about training. Steve will be keeping you abreast of everything going on with the International Association of Fire Service Instructors and keeping you connected to that group. Aaron will be keeping you connected to FDIC and all the great stuff we're doing there, and I'll be stopping in from time to time along with my cohort Erich Roden. But I think we've entrusted two of the finest gentlemen I know and great conversationalists who will be bringing in great guests and having tremendous topics. If you want to participate, if you want to get a hold of Aaron or Steve, how can folks get a hold of you if they want to participate in a hangout or if they've got suggestions for you? Aaron, and also, how do folks get a hold of you?
You know, there's the traditional way, Facebook, Twitter, I'm on both of those, as well as my email is posted on the isfsi.org website. So if you go to isfsi.org and look for the board of directors, my email is posted there, and you can shoot me an email anytime.
Great. And Aaron, other than the post office...
Other than the post office, which is a big picture, you can get me same thing on Facebook, as easy as could be. My email address is also on my website, onscenetraining.com, and you know, that's really the easy ones to get a hold of us at.
Hey, well, listen, there's nothing more important than training, in my opinion. I think that training and education, being prepared is the key. Always being prepared. We covered some important topics today. Thank you to my great friends Bill Carey and Jason Hubelman for sending in a few questions. To those of you who I didn't get to your questions, I apologize. An hour goes by awfully quickly. We are looking for great guests, so please reach out to Aaron and Steve and let them know who you'd like to hear interviewed, or if you'd like to be interviewed yourself, if you think you've got something to contribute. Or some of the stuff I think we're looking for are some of the folks that are doing tablet command and people who are using the cloud-based technology, folks who are doing hands-on stuff, or if you've got an innovative new approach to something, this is the place to talk about it and come get it out there to the general public. To all of you out there today dealing with the cold, please be careful. Watch watch your footing. Make sure you stay off the ice. Bring some sand. Bring some kitty litter in case you get hit with the snowy weather and all that good stuff. To everybody out there who's looking forward to this new year, I certainly am. If you haven't registered for FDIC, please register. I know I get a lot of emails from folks in March and February saying, can you help me out for this or that class? A lot of these classes, once they fill up, that's it. They're full. So especially with hands-on training and the workshops, get registered now. Secure your spot. Don't miss out on a chance to be part of the Train the Trainer class that the IFSI is putting on fire behavior, on the NIST-UL class, on the tremendous bailout class that's going on the amazing training that Aaron's going to be providing, and Chief Brunacini and Mikey Champo, and over I think it's 500 instructors are coming in this year when you count all the hands-on folks. So just please register now, because it's filling up so quickly, and it's your conference, and be part of it, and get to go to the classes you want to get to go to. And thank you so much for joining with us today. We hope you all have a very, very prosperous new year. It's been a great pleasure to sit in today with my two good friends, and I look forward to seeing their shows in the future. And remember, everybody, please be careful out there.